You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Gold, crude oil, corn, soybeans, and more. With so many tradable products, the futures options market can be an intimidating place. How can you possibly keep track of the latest trading developments across so many different products? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Welcome to This Week in Futures Options, the program designed to help active futures options traders stay on top of this ever-changing marketplace. Each week, we'll break down the top trades, hot products, volatility explosions, and much more. This Week in Futures Options streams live, so be sure to check out our live stream via the Mixlr app. That's MIXLR. Or join our live chat room at mixlr.com/options-insider. Whether you're an experienced veteran or a newcomer looking to separate the wheat from the lean hogs, This Week in Futures Options has the information you can't find anywhere else. This Week in Futures Options is brought to you by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. For more information and educational resources about futures options at CME Group, visit cmegroup.com/options. And now, get ready to break down the latest futures options trading activity. It's time for This Week in Futures Options.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again. I am back in the Chi-Town studios. Time to hold court on a little bit of futures options trading activity. Yes, it is time once again for This Week in Futures Options. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com. Traveling a bit this week, but back, ready to go with a bit of a cold or something in hand. So a little bit under the weather here today, listeners. If you hear me popping cough drops in the background, just to keep the show flowing, keep my voice flowing throughout the show. Of course, if you want to keep the content flowing, make sure, you're subscribed to the full network. If you're just listening to TWIFO, you're missing out on nearly a dozen other programs that are coming at you throughout the week. And B, if you want to go above and beyond, you want to join us for awesome pro Q&A sessions, come back at the end of the week to break down all of the interesting and weird and unusual activity trades that came across our radar for options oddities. Also, giveaways, great giveaways like the July Pro Trading Crate. Probably going to give that away tomorrow on Volatility Views. Only one place to go. Theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. As we learn who's joining us on the old CME Group hot seat this week, I'm pleased to welcome back Martin Franchi, the CEO of NinjaTrader. Martin, welcome back to TWIFO, sir.
Mark, thanks for having me back.
And it's been nearly 2 years since you last joined us here on the program. Obviously, a lot's gone on in the markets. A lot's gone on in the world of NinjaTrader. So let's catch our audience up. We have a lot of new listeners who've joined us since the last time you appeared on the program. Give our listeners a bit overview of your background in the world of futures and indeed futures options, as well as what it is you folks do over there at NinjaTrader, sir.
Yeah, happy to. And yeah, nothing's happened in the last 2 years, right? It's been pretty status quo. Obviously, that's a joke. NinjaTrader, I'm the CEO of NinjaTrader Group. We are one of the largest direct-to-consumer modern fintechs focusing on retail futures traders. Currently, we support a community of traders of 1.7 million users. And, you know, Mark, last time we spoke, that number was 700,000. So when you think about the growth in retail participation across really every asset class, there's continues to be this flight to futures for people who are learning about the asset class, the benefits of it, all the things that most of your community and listeners know. But yeah, that's NinjaTrader in a nutshell. We focus on retail, we focus on futures, and we're pushing the envelope on creating experiences and working with exchanges on product innovation to support the retail trading community.
Wow, nearly 1 million new users since the last time we chatted, Martin. So you've been busy since last we chatted out there. Catch us up really quickly. You mentioned the growth on the platform, the growth in new users. What else is new? What else is the cool, hot new thing over there at NinjaTrader since last we spoke, sir?
You know what's interesting? What we're finding, there's an incredible amount of traders who are coming to the platform. This is a traditional active trader, knows what they're doing, technical analysis, trading systems that they integrate into our platform. Like that hasn't changed. What's been interesting and has changed is this emerging consumer who's finding their way to futures for the first time. And the desire, what they want. First, they want to find a modern experience, which NinjaTrader was really one of the first modern fintechs to support that type of user. They're also looking for education, content, and risk-free ways to engage in markets, whether that's through like learn and earn type opportunities, whether that's through dynamic education, trading contests. There's a ton of people who are coming, and they're so excited to get going. But, you can't be overconfident on day one. You got to learn, you got to put in your dues. And that's a lot of the focus for the business over the last couple of years has not only been curating really modern, intuitive experiences for that consumer who might be coming from another asset class where that's, more common and been around for a long time, but also wrapping that in education and ways to give consumers confidence in trading.
All right, a lot to unpack there, Martin, as we keep on rolling into a little bit of the Movers and Shakers Report.
It's time to find out what's rallying on the light side and falling to the dark side at CME Group this week. It's time for the Movers and Shakers Report.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Movers and Shakers Report, the portion of the show where we break down everything lighting it up to the light side and to the dark side over there at CME Group this week. If you follow us at Options on Twitter, you follow CME on Twitter. We both tweet this graph out right before the show so you could see it for yourselves. Surprise, surprise, we are mostly biased towards the red, though as today's move continues, particularly out in the equity realm, that might be a little bit different by the end of the day. We'll get to all the stuff lighting it up over there at CME in a second, Martin, but I love whenever we're joined by representatives from the brokerage world because they usually have interesting insights into the pockets of liquidity that go up on their platform. Also, you're joining us in an auspicious week, I think, to say the least. It's been a bit of a topsy-turvy week out there, kicking things off, of course, on Monday with just an aggressive sell-off. VIX cash spiraling up into the 60 handle. Haven't seen that in years. And now the rest of the week, we're starting to see markets kind of claw their way back. So obviously, you're joining us in an interesting week. What was lighting up the tape over there at NinjaTrader this week, Martin? Was it just equities because they were so hot? What were the clients over there at NinjaTrader slinging fast and furious this week?
It's interesting. The mix shifted a little bit. I mean, our customers, the users on the platform, gravitate towards high liquidity, really familiar products in the index complex. But you saw some really interesting activity, coming into the week. Prior, gold gapped up, and then all of a sudden it took another jump, and then it got punted. Like we saw more activity in metals and a little bit more activity actually in the crypto complex as well, as those have just kind of taken on extraordinary moves this week. So it's not a normal week at NinjaTrader right now, where a lot of our customers who have kind of learned and honed their style and their systems based on the equities complex. They are bouncing around more this week because of the opportunities and kind of the volatility we're experiencing. And yeah, it was unbelievable to watch, the Sunday open for us. I mean, my phone's blowing up. I'm watching the markets and I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, like what is happening? We saw you've already told your community, but like the swings that we saw and then the clawback that you just brought up, pretty wild, and it's been an interesting week. So people are trading all over the place, to be honest. I think they've gravitated into a couple complexes that I'd say they generally under-index to.
All right, let's get out there then, listeners, and see what's lighting it up out here this week over at CME. Martin, as our guest, I will give you the pride of place. You get to choose where we begin. Should we begin to the light side or to the dark side this week, sir?
I'm going to stay consistent. I'm going to stay consistent to my last appearance and optimistic as we claw back. Let's go light side.
All right, to the light side we go, listeners. And it's appropriate. Martin was just saying they saw a lot of metals paper on their platform this week, so it's appropriate we kick things off. Number 5 to the light side in the metals with palladium up 1.22%. Number 4, we're going out to the realm of FX. It's the Aussie dollar, US dollar. Interesting out there, 1.38% to the upside. Number 3, keeping it in FX. You know, it's an interesting week when two FX names making it out there. Of course, everything going on with yen USD was a big part of the brouhaha that started playing out over the weekend this past week that sent us into that downward spiral on Monday. Number 3, we had the yen USD up 1.46%. Number 2, going out to the rates complex, in particular, 3-month SOFR up 4.39%. And the number 1 light side, indeed, the number 1 percentage mover on the board this week, it is Nat Gas up 9.81%. So a banger week out there for Nat Gas. Now to the dark side we go, listeners. Number 5, off to the ags, in particular the livestock. It is lean hogs off 4.8%. It was number 2 in the other direction last week, up about 4.5%. So pretty much giving back everything that it gained last week. Number 4, out to the equities, in particular our old pal, the Russell 2000, off 5.25%. Of course, if we react that right now, probably be up a little bit more. Number 3, back to the livestock. It's feeder cattle off 5.3%. Number 2, to the equities again, this time to the consumer discretionary sector of the S&P 500, off 5.33%. And the number 1 dark side mover this week, listeners, another one Martin mentioned, it is Bitcoin off 5.85%. Let's check out a little bit of vol action over here at CME as well. Remember, you can run these numbers for yourselves. Just type CME and CVOL into any browser out there. You'll get this dashboard here, then group them by 1 week, go into the aggregates column. You want to see the aggregates of the different complexes. And you can see exactly what we're looking at right now. It's mostly a mixed bag here on the CVOL front. We've got a lot of downside, but a few names popping off a little bit this week. Today, a lot of vol coming in as well, which is why everything is showing red today. Let's start things off top of our list with the FX CVOL at 7.59, off about 0.18. Doesn't sound like a lot, but not a bad move out there for FX vol when you're starting at a baseline of around 7. The range for the week, 685 to the low side and 852 to the upside. So hanging out kind of in the middle of their weekly range. Right below, we have the ag products, once again, defying expectations. Pinning the needle for the week, 2309 is where they're hanging out right now. That's a little, they off about 1/3 of a point today. So they're off their high of 2349 that they set yesterday. The low came 2181 last week out there. Below that, we have the Treasury price volatility at a 7.55, off about 0.38 today. On the week, I've had a range of 689 to the dark side and 871. So another one kind of hanging out towards the middle of its range. Below that, we have the metals. 1963 is where that CVOL is hanging out, off a whopping 1.5 just today. So metals vol coming in quite a bit today and also coming in a lot on the week. The low was 1879. I think we set that earlier this week. The high was 2320 set last week. So metals vol coming in quite a bit. Then we have the commodities aggregate CVOL below that, 3589, off 1.75 points just today. And the range for the week, 35.05 to the dark side and 40.8 to the upside. So hanging out towards the lower end of its range as well. Then we have the aggregate energy CVOL, 54.25, off 2.25 points today. So energy vol coming in a little bit today. The range for the week, 52.5 to the downside, 61.13 to the upside. So a lot of vol coming in, even though we are hanging out a little bit above the low for the week. And at the bottom of our list today is the Treasury yield vol. That's at a 137.72, off nearly 7 points today, 6.82 points. The range for the week, 124.59 to the dark side, 158.07 to the upside. So a whole heck of a lot, I should say, of yield volatility on the tape today, even though we are hanging out in the middle of that range right now. Well, we have a lot to unpack. Looking here at our list, you mentioned Bitcoin. lighting it up out here this week. So maybe we'll start in crypto first.
It's time to explore the volatile world of Bitcoin, Ether, and more. It's time to talk about crypto.
All right, listeners, to the wild world of crypto we go. Go to that drop down, cmegroup.com/TWIFO, of course, is the place to go to follow along with the show, generate your own reports. Then once you're there, go into that asset class drop down, go down one slot to cryptocurrencies, and we can begin our journey in Bitcoin. Martin, you said it was a wild week for crypto on your platform. What were the folks slinging over there on NinjaTrader this week?
Yeah, primarily, so the NinjaTrader consumer. So honestly, if I could predict any of this stuff, it would be unbelievable. And I'm watching these numbers, and it's funny. I get messages from like my high school kids, like, should I buy crypto? Teach me what this thing is. And it's interesting the amount of interest that just continues to rise in these assets. Our customers were trading significantly into the micro complex of CME, Bitcoin, and ETH products. And they riding the wild ride along with the rest of the trading community.
I think you and I talked about this a couple of years ago on your appearance, and it's still the case right now. It is a wild week for crypto. Bitcoin off nearly 6%. The Bitcoin options doing decent paper, 1,861 contracts, but again, not lighting the world on fire. And you mentioned the micro, a little bit more palatable to the retail audience out there. The weapon of choice for the NinjaTrader clientele as well. Doing a little bit of volume this week as well. Nearly 3,000 contracts, 2,879. So again, decent paper, but that is a micro contract. I'm curious from your perspective, Martin. A lot of people were very excited when CME listed these products. They thought it was really going to re-energize the crypto space, do a lot of paper. And so far, that hasn't really materialized. Why do you think these products are struggling to gain traction, sir?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think that, for our traders, a lot of times, I think the CME was designing this in some respect to track the spot trader. And the spot trader, in some respects, wanted to trade both of these products, spot and futures, in the same account. In NinjaTrader at the time, that wasn't possible. And there's other complications as to why that'd be the case. But you do have Coinbase has launched their futures, their products, and people are starting to gravitate there. There's actually quite a bit of volume going on in the crypto complex, obviously in their futures exchange. So I think it's probably the primary thing. I also think that when you look at the NinjaTrader community of traders, new products in general, just across the board, take time for traders to understand, how and why they want to trade them. And when you've been training yourself and your systems are designed around the index complex, it's going to take a minute. And honestly, it just has taken far longer than I think most thought it would for all those reasons.
Well, let's see what Martin's clients were lighting up out here over on the micro Bitcoin options this week at CME. Like I said, a decent week, about 3,000 contracts. We've seen it do much more, obviously. The big dog out here looks like was in the September contract, has about 50 days to go. If you're wondering right now, that future's at about 60,400. So Bitcoin retracing back below the 60K level, at least in that front future. The vol out here, 56 3/4. So again, crypto, one of the more volatile complexes we're going to talk about here on the show this week. Pretty much crypto and nat gas, and occasionally an ag or two that can really threaten these levels. And in terms of action, it was the 70,000 calls, lighting it up a whopping 200 times this week, all opening, all on Monday. So somebody came in and opened up a couple hundred of the 70,000 calls. 70,000 in Bitcoin by the end of about 50 days. If past is prologue, they're probably buying these, listeners. A lot of hodlers, they usually tend to bid up the upside here in Bitcoin options. Looking at the skew right now, the skew, nothing really to write home about. It has been pretty strongly bid in the past. In fact, if you go out to December of this year, the calls were about 5% bid. Right now in September, they're only about 1% bid. So that's a little bit light, maybe showing that some of the upside bulls have been a little bit exhausted, perhaps, by some of this recent volatility out here. Martin, I'm curious for you. We saw a lot of action on the ETH front of late as well, with all of the excitement around the approvals of the ETFs. Has that caused a corresponding influx of activity in NinjaTrader on the ETH side, sir?
It has. We're getting a lot more inquiries and a lot more customer participation and engagement. It's interesting as as the interest spikes for us, we see a lot of trading in our test and training environments. And there's a significant amount of that going on in that product right now.
And I know you're futures first. What percentage of your NinjaTrader clientele would you say are also dabbling in the futures options there, Martin?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we actually have pretty significant projects in place to be able to do incredibly complex option strategies on the platform. We don't do enough of that today. So I would say like right now it's pretty minimal on the futures option side. Although, obviously we've talked in the past and we talked 2 years ago about the event contract space. Again, another product that the timing needs a little bit more a little time to mature and the product fit to mature. We think that the options complex, and we've seen a ton. I mean, we've all seen like the massive adoption of it. And on the NinjaTrader platform, I think we've got a little bit of work to do before we are, a significant player in that space. So a little more investment. Right now, it's sub 1%.
All right, well, we'll get into all of that fun with the event contracts in a second because a lot to unpack there. Really quickly, so we're just talking about ETH. Let's dive into some of the micro Ether activity over there at CME as well. Again, a lot of people very excited about ETH. If you're intrigued by all things crypto, make sure you're listening to the full network, A, listeners, and B, make sure you're checking out our Crypto Rundown program every Monday here on the network where we do just this. We break down all of the action in the crypto derivatives out there. A lot of fun stuff, especially on the ETH front of late. So about nearly 5,000 contracts on the micro Ether front this week, which again, not a bad level for these contracts. Looks like it was the August contract doing about 62.5% of the paper this week. Those contracts expire in about 22 days. ETH right now, 25.94, off 430 handles or over 14%. So ETH obviously taking a drubbing over the course of the past few weeks. It was north of 3,400 not too long ago. So ETH coming back down here to the dark side, listeners. In terms of vol, as you might imagine, looking frothy, 73.61, up nearly 17 points out here. So ETH might take the award for the most volatile asset. Well, we haven't gotten to nat gas yet. We'll have to check in on nat gas first. But right now, ETH looking pretty frothy. Last week, the puts were 4% bid. This week, 2.1% bid on the skew front. The calls last week, 1.3% cheap. This week, 1% cheap. It's interesting. Like I said earlier, usually we see a pronounced bid to the upside in most of these crypto names. So the fact that we're not seeing that in ETH right now, very interesting. And in terms of action, it was 1,000 of the 3,400s expiring in August going up this week that was leading the dance out here in micro ETH. And all that went up on Monday, so they weren't playing around. Looks like somebody came in. And again, given the skew out here, it's hard to tell exactly. Looks like they could have bought these. And again, if past is prologue, they probably did. We also saw 700 of the 2,700s going up on Tuesday, also opening. So a lot of opening upside paper here in ETH. Again, if past is prologue, probably looking for a little bit of a bounce, a little bit of bottom fishing out here. So far, that has materialized to a degree, but obviously not back up to the 2,700, let alone the 3,400 strikes out there. So interesting stuff afoot out here in ETH. Listeners, have you found yourself slinging a little more ETH in the wake of these new ETFs? I'm curious. Hit us up. Let us know out here. And Martin, you kind of mentioned the big product that we talked about a lot when you last joined us a couple of years ago. Of course, that was right around the launch of the event contracts. We have a couple more years under our belt, so let's get into those a little bit. Maybe let's start for all of our newer listeners out here who weren't listening to the show the last time you joined us. What are we talking about? What are these event contracts everyone's talking about, Martin?
Yeah, so event contracts are again relatively new asset to futures, where you have a binary outcome. Generally, these are one-day contracts, and you know what? I think one of the things that the retail consumers like about them is the predefined risk. Getting into that at the end of the day, are you gonna walk away with $100? You're gonna walk away with $0, and you can trade them intraday. Don't get me wrong, and people do trade them intraday, but I think the predefined outcome is quite unique, and consumers like it. The one thing I would say is the products. I think the whole industry is learning a little bit, right? So you have startup exchanges, you have the CME suite of products. They're continuing to play with the formula, if you will, and I think that you're going to see a lot of new stuff come out over the next year or so relative to not just, where our index is going to close on the day, which is kind of the primary, and where our different futures contracts are going to close on the day, which is generally how it's traded right now. You're going to see things around corporate earnings. You're going to see things that aren't in market today. So on the business side, I would say that we're extremely bullish on the asset class. It's going to take a little bit more time for consumers to, adapt to it and get the liquidity in the market and make it something that people are excited about and familiar with. But it's something we're continue to strongly invest in.
You mentioned some tweaks to the formula. I am glad to see they tweaked one thing. I know when we first talked about them a couple of years ago around the launch, one of the things that bothered me about them, there has become a bit of a common nomenclature in the binary world. If you price things 0 to 100 based around probability, it's just an intuitive way for people to trade these things. They understand if they think something has a 40% probability of happening, then they're probably going to be 35, 45 in the market, somewhere around that 40% probability. The CME, when they first launched these, I believe they were 1/5 the size, so you had to multiply by 5. There was a lot of obtuse mechanics at work there that kind of obfuscated the core use case for these. They have gotten rid of that now, so I'm glad to see. If you're looking at it right now, listeners, you have the E-mini. Will it close above 53.5 today? Yes or no? And you can go in that right now and just trade it on a normal probability, 1 to pretty much 99, which is the way you would expect these to work. So, Martin, were you happy they made that change as well? Is that a little bit more intuitive for your customers?
We were, and that was some feedback that we received from our customers, that CME received from the trading community. That's one thing we're all good at, is kind of listening to customers. The initial thesis was the smaller the better and the more accessible to consumers. And what we realized was you add that extra mental hop and it just made it a little less intuitive. So I'm glad we switched that. I'm very glad.
And obviously it was a wild week this week, especially in the equities, but also in metals and a variety of other things. Did you see any interesting activity in the event contracts this week, especially on Monday when things were whipsawing like crazy there, Martin?
It was correlated directly to what you saw, right? In fact, what a lot of times we see, even though, we're breaking volume records and there's ultra high engagement, you have a whole nother subset of customers that just get out, right? They're like, look at this is just a little nuts and it's hard to predict what's going to happen. So we actually saw people exit out and say, I'm gonna step away from my computer for a little bit, and we saw that in those products.
So the last time we chatted, there were 11 markets you could trade on the event contract. It seems that is still the case. You can do the E-mini S&P 500, listeners, E-mini NASDAQ, E-mini Russell 2000, or E-mini Dow. Then you could do the Euro USD. You could do gold, silver, and copper. You could do light sweet crude, Henry Hub, Nat Gas, and Bitcoin. So we have yet to expand the product mix by my count. Is that correct there, Martin?
You got it. You're correct. That's not to say that it's going to stay that way. I think they tweaked the formula a little bit, and give time to these exchanges. They got it's funny. They've also got a lot of regulatory red tape when you start to think about some of the products that exchanges want to launch. So they're working on stuff, and I'm excited to be a launch partner when it happens.
Yes, the binaries obviously open the doors to many other product categories outside of the traditional markets out there. So certainly will be interesting to see if we could expand to some of those down the road. But right now, listeners, 11 different markets you can trade. I'm curious, have you traded the event contracts? Does the new pricing, the new nomenclature, does it make it a little bit more intuitive for you? These are great starter contracts. That's what I've always argued about with these products, Martin. Is there a great starter futures contract for a new retail trader? Maybe they're coming in and they're just starting to dip their toes in these markets, biting off a whole, let's say, I don't know, WTI contract, whatever the case may be, even an E-mini. That could be an intimidating thing. But coming in, looking at, will the S&P close above? It just dropped 53.10 now, yes or no? And going, pretty much $0 to $100. It's a much more bite-sized and intuitive package. And they start there, they nibble at a few of these over time. They developed a little bit of a sense of how these products work, how the underlying works, more importantly. And then they graduate to the bigger products. Has that been your experience as well there, Martin? These are kind of the gateway drug, if you will, towards the bigger futures?
Yeah, Mark, you nailed it. And it goes back to what I was saying before. A lot of the consumers who are new to futures, they want either risk-free experiences. So it's really training experiences, right? Where there's some incentive to educate yourself, but then they want predefined risk as well. So I think a lot of consumers, especially as the complex kind of widens and products become more familiar and you start to see things around like maybe corporate earnings event contracts and things like that, when that starts to kind of expand, it's only going to continue to be a more familiar on-ramp to people. And again, you got to watch the underlying. So ultimately the goal, and we've talked to these customers, the goal of all these traders is to get their way to the micro, get their way to the mini, and keep sizing up. But this is an amazing entry point. And it's also something kind of fun for an active trader to dabble in on the side. We see a lot of people who are throwing quite a bit of volume around suddenly are like, I'm going to just trade some event contracts today because I'm having fun with them. So there's a couple that's an alternative use case we didn't expect.
All right, Martin, we're going to make you event contract king for a day. You get to choose what they add next out here. So if you had your druthers, if you had your picks, the 11 we already have, what would you like to see number 12 be in terms of markets that they add to the event contracts?
Okay, so it's complicated, right? Because I'm not thinking about event contracts based on something that exists in the CME world today. I think where the activity would be really interesting is around economic news and corporate earnings, because you have a lot of people who are trading futures and indexes around economic news. And that can be challenging. Active trading, anything can be challenging. But there's a ton of excitement around doing it. And a great way to do it and a great way to get started would be around trading the actual news, not an index or other futures product that correlates to the news. So I think if I had my way, that's what I would do next.
Interesting. Moving beyond the traditional products we've seen already into something a little bit more on the earnings front. That speaks to the event contract at the end of the day. You're trying to trade events. So as I mentioned, that does open the door to many interesting, to put it mildly, things, Martin, out there. As we keep on rolling, we mentioned things are pretty interesting right now in energy, in particular nat gas. So let's head out there next.
It's time to tap into the deep options well of black gold, Texas tea, nat gas, and more. It's time to talk energy.
All right, listeners, I think I got one more product in me before my voice gives out here for the day. So I think it's appropriate that we wind things up here in nat gas on the show today. Go into that cmegroup.com/TWIFO drop down. You're going to go down 2 slots to energy, listeners. Then in product family, you're going to go down 3 slots to nat gas. Then you're going to kick things off in our old friend nat gas at front future at a 212, almost a 213, up about 16 cents or a little over 8%. As we mentioned, nat gas, our largest percentage mover on the week, up 9.81%. Now, obviously, it's a cheaper underlying, so you're going to expect to see more large percentage swings out there, but it's delivering on the volume front as well. 668,000 contracts on the tape out here. So I know nat gas didn't leap to mind for a lot of you, especially earlier this week when the narrative was all equities and gold and a few other products, of course, volatility out there. But nat gas having a pretty explosive, pun intended, week out there as well. Martin, you said your customers have been slinging a lot of things, including energy. What was lighting up their tape and your platform over there at NinjaTrader in the nat gas front this week, sir?
I mean, exactly what you saw. I mean, our customers, when our customers are trading energy, they generally gravitate to the CL. They're trading crude. Saw a ton of engagement there. But like I said before, people started moving into products they don't normally trade. And we did actually see a pretty significant uptick in nat gas, which is not something that we normally see. But I think it just speaks to the move.
Nat gas is one of these products that kind of defies logic. Usually you see an underlying hanging out around $2, Martin. You don't expect to see a lot of options flow going on with that product. And yet nat gas will do 600,000 to 1 million contracts a week. So it's kind of putting the lie to the notion that anything below $10 or certainly $5, Martin, is where options go to die, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, then to the world of nat gas we go. And since you mentioned, crude, maybe we'll sneak a little crude in there as well, just for the NinjaTrader crowd out there. I'll add one more to my ever-dying voice, listeners. But right now, he said this week, 668,000 contracts on the tape. Of that, 35% of that going up in the September contract that has about 19 days to go. So we're going to hang out there. Vol out there right now, 62 even, off 670. So I said we'll see if nat gas can topple Ether this week. No, Ether had it around a 73, I believe. So over 10 points above nat gas. If you go to the contract expiring tomorrow in nat gas, that's trading at close to a 73. But again, that has less than a day to go, so there's not really much vol left to talk about there. But intriguing nonetheless. In terms of skew, last week the puts 4.3% bid. This week 7.5% bid. And the calls 3.3% cheap. Last week 5.1% cheap. This week, so no love for the calls. All action to the puts this week, which is kind of interesting. Probably also explains why it's all puts on our tape this week, listeners, including, we have to go out a little bit. We have to go out to the October 1/2 puts. That is the number one most active contract out here. About 48 days to go till October expiration. The 1/2 puts going up 44,000 times this week. The big day actually today, 19, almost 20,000 going up today. So nearly half of that going up today. That's against an OI of 59,000. So there is size OI on that 1/2 strike, listeners. 14,000 going up on Wednesday, slightly closing. 7,800 on Tuesday opening, and about 3,000 on Monday, slightly closing there. And then behind that, we have a bit of a tie for two between 1 3/4 puts also in October, going up 25,000 times this week. The big day for those was yesterday, 11,000 versus 8,700 going up today against a remaining OI of 48,000. And then we also have the 1 3/4 puts expiring in September, also going up about 24,000 times this week. The big day for those, let's see, was today. 7,700 going up today. Looks like closing all week long. 6,800 on Tuesday, 5,100 on Monday, 3,700 on Wednesday. It looks like folks were bailing on these 1 3/4 puts all week long. The OI remaining on this strike, 33,000. Makes some sense as we're moving away from this strike. Folks want to get the heck out of Dodge. Maybe closing out some puts they have. Maybe, I don't see much rolling paper. Looks like straight closes on the 1 3/4 put. So a lot of puts lighting up the tape here this week, listeners. Here's some weird paper lists. We've been talking about weird meme paper in some of these names for a while. Looks like the 8 calls. They used to talk about these strips, these option strips that would go up every week for a while. It was 2 puts, 1 3/4 puts, 3 calls. How about the 8 calls? Those calls going up 4,500 times in January, 5,200 times in February, 4,500 times in March. So we got a little bit of an 8 call strip going up this week, listeners. By the way, that future at about $3.50. So got a long way to go to hit the 8 strike, but nonetheless, got quite the slew of 8 call paper. And since Martin mentioned that his clients have been slinging a lot of crude oil this week, I lied. We'll do one more product for my dwindling voice listeners. Let's go out to our old pal, WTI. Stay in that same asset class of energy. You're going to pop up one slot in the product family to crude oil. Martin, you said your clients are slinging a lot of WTI. What was on their tape this week, sir?
I don't have any exact numbers sitting in front of me at the moment, but we saw just, I would say, 40-50% more engagement in the product than we do in any given week. People were attracted to it, and I think a lot of the uncertainty in the world and the quest for finding that trade just put a ton of people into the product. Nothing, but honestly, nothing. When you think about what happened this week and some of the other asset classes in Asia and Bitcoin, crude ultimately, although it did spike up, wasn't the top of our list this week. So
let's see what was the top of the list out here in WTI this week, listeners. Was it an active week? Actually, it was a very active week. 928,000 contracts. So one of the first weeks in a while where WTI is taking it to nat gas from a volume perspective. Haven't seen that in a while. Looks like the big dog out here with about 39% of the paper was in the September contract. Has 7 days to go, so some weekly paper lighting it up out here. By the way, WTI at a 76, pretty much even, 76.03, up 2.5 points or 3.5% since Monday. The vol out here, 34, pretty much even off about 2.5 points this week, so roughly half what we're seeing out there in nat gas. And then skew-wise, the puts last week, 2.4% cheap this week. 3.2% bid, so puts catching a bid. The calls last week, 4.8% bid. This week, flat, literally flat. So no interest in the calls either way out here in September, which is kind of interesting. Also interesting given the fact that it was the 80 calls in September that were leading the dance out here by a country mile. 34,254 going up this week. The big day was Tuesday. 14,544 mostly opening. 10,000, almost 11,000 going up on Monday, slightly closing there. So maybe some folks bailing on the 80s on Monday and then changing their tune, opening for size on Tuesday. 4,700 yesterday, slightly opening, and 4,200 today against an OI of 22,000. So 80 calls. Only 4 handles out of the money. They got a week to go. Listener, you think we can hit an 80 handle? Can we threaten that by the end of the week, listeners? I guess we shall find out, or I should say in a week. That'll be interesting to see. Behind it, we had the 77, so 30s, or I should say if the 80s were too much for you, how about the 77s going up 20,100 times here? The big day for those, Tuesday, 9,100, mostly opening there. 6,500 today against an OI of 12,000. Let's scroll really quickly, see if we can see any other interesting and or weird paper out here, listeners. Before we get out of here for this week and my voice collapses, let's go out to Dees. 99 days to go. That future at a 73.5. It was the 60 puts doing about 16,000 contracts out there this week. So Dees 60 puts. Interesting. The big day for those was Monday, 6,500. It's like folks were closing. So maybe in that initial sell-off to the downside, some folks were monetizing some of those 60 puts. About 5,000 on Tuesday, mostly opening. 3,500 on Wednesday, so slightly closing again, and only 1,200 today against an OI of 25,000. So intriguing paper out here, listeners. 60 puts by December. You like those, or are you getting the heck out of Dodge on those? Either way, we have to get the heck out of Dodge on the show, listeners. All right, that music means my voice can take no more. But before we go, listeners, Martin, if our listeners are intrigued, they want to check out NinjaTrader, maybe try out the event contracts or anything else you folks are cooking up over there, where should they go? What should they do?
Mark, send them to NinjaTrader.com. Be happy to provide all of the infrastructure, information, content to give the confidence to navigate these tricky but rewarding futures markets.
And we like to leave our audience wanting more, so we have a couple of seconds here at the end of the show, Martin. If you want to leave our audience with maybe a tease, a hint of what they can look forward to coming down the pike from you and the team at NinjaTrader, now is the time, sir. The floor is yours.
Yeah, the next interesting thing that people are really going to enjoy is, again, I mentioned these risk-free experiences. We're going to be launching a lot of trading competitions coming up soon with sizable prizes, no entry fee, just a way to learn and engage with markets, and hopefully come away with some rewarding prizes. So stay tuned for that stuff. That's coming in the fourth quarter. So stay tuned.
There you go, listeners. Some size prizes. You want to get in on that action? NinjaTrader is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires over. Give them a follow on Twitter while you're at it, listeners, at NinjaTrader. All one word. And of course, you know where to go to check out these reports we're talking about on the show and much more. CMEgroup.com/TWIFO, TWIFO is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. That's going to do it for us on the network today. Got to go rest my voice because I'm back at it noon tomorrow, listeners, talking about all things volatility. Spoiler alert, we had a little vol on the docket. You may have noticed this week, so a lot to unpack. Who's going to join us on Volatility Views tomorrow? We got to tune in at noon Central to find out. Then we're back one final time for the week, exclusively for our pro folks, to check out a little bit of unusual activity on options oddities. You can head on over to theoptionsinsider.com/pro to learn more about all that. Then we're off for the weekend till we're back again on Monday for the option block, all the way through to next Thursday, another episode of This Week in Futures Options. Stay safe out there, everybody.
This Week in Futures Options is brought to you by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. CME Group's markets help individuals and businesses around the world manage risks and seize opportunities. CME Group offers the deepest and most liquid options on futures across all asset classes, including interest rates, equity indexes, foreign exchange, energy, agriculture, and metals. For more information and educational resources about futures options at CME Group, visit cmegroup.com/options. This broadcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute trading advice or the solicitation of purchases or sale of any futures or options. The rulebook of the applicable exchange should be consulted as the authoritative source on all current contract specifications. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.